Useless unions was the headline in yesterday's Gleaner. We pick up the discussion on the current role of trade unions with President of Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions, Helene Davis White.
Was it a statement in the Gleaner or was it a question? Because you said it a while ago. Like it was
Good
a
morning.
statement.
Morning.
I suspect I know what line you're going to take.
Well, you should.
Let me start with the role of a union overall. What is the role of a union when it regards to like a
Well,
workforce?
essentially, a union's role is not limited only to the workplace, but within the workplace, it's about ensuring that workers will be able to get better conditions of work and increased salaries and allowances. That's basically what is the role of the union.
And the
at
suggestion
the
is that I couldn't do that myself, or you are better able to do it for me?
Well, you know, there is a saying that says unity is strength. And usually when you have individuals going in, you know, it's easy to say no to an individual. It's not so easy to say no to a group of
Strength in
persons
numbers.
who are resolute, right? So that's the general concept behind how trade unions actually operate. A lot of it depends on the strength of the members. And a lot of persons will look at the trade union's role within the context of the leaders of the unions, but a lot of it depends on
the members.
On the members.
How long have unions been around? Quite a while.
Yes, well, since the start of the Industrial Revolution in Britain, that was the beginning of the modern trade union movement.
Okay, so what has changed over those years? Is it easier, more difficult for you to operate? I'm sure it's perhaps
Far more
increasingly
difficult to know.
And why?
Yeah. Well, in the past, you know, unions had more ascendancy. At that time, we had better economies, yeah, and so it was easier to make representation and be able to succeed in your representation.
Yes.
It's far more difficult now because of the economy within which we are operating, and that's not only in Jamaica; it's worldwide. And this question of whether or not unions are relevant is being asked right across the world now. But because what we have now is really the ascendancy of capital now. Capital is very mobile and they are able to do almost anything with the introduction of ICT, in the technology and so
in
on.
the companies, right?
And so unions have had to be almost reinventing themselves in terms of how we operate. So in the case of the Jamaican trade union movement, a lot of persons believe that we are not doing anything because we are not in the streets. Because a lot of persons see that as advocacy. But we have had to change our mode of operation.
Yes.
And so for several years now, what we have been using is the social dialogue approach, which means that we are working with the social partners to be able to get what it is that we want. Of course, when you go into social partnership kind of talks, each of us come to the table with our own desires and so on, and then you try to find a way to be able to get what each one wants without destroying
the common ground.
Right.
So I hear you say negotiation is more difficult now. I've been kind of keeping abreast of some of the negotiations over the last couple of years. It's near impossible. So people are questioning your efficacy because of that. So how do you? I don't know how you maneuver in a situation like that.
Well, what we have to look at the end of the day is what is the end game that we want. So several years ago within the public sector, and this problem is not only a public sector problem, because you would have found right across our entire economy you have problems, and with readjustments and realignments and so on.
Right.
It creates problems. One of the things that we certainly within the public sector felt had to be paramount was a question of protection of jobs. So we always use that as something that we want to leverage to see how many of our members we can keep in employment. And so we would have because of what was happening in the economy in the early 2000s, we would have entered into a memorandum of understanding with the government of Jamaica with regard to how
Wages
the
and-
public sector
yes.
is
Structured,
organized
right.
and so on. And in one of the major thing that we wanted out of that was the protection of the jobs. And so we ended up saying we would accept a wage freeze in exchange for the jobs. At that time, the figure that was floating about was about 15,000. That's not to say that we are opposed to job cuts as a rule as such, as long as it is within the context of proper reorganization. It's not just job cuts for the sake of just trying to achieve a particular number. As long as any employer can show that they are reorganizing and that the unions are involved in those discussions about reorganization for efficiency, then if job cuts come, but what we would then be negotiating, yes, the job cuts may be necessary, but you need to determine what is going to be the fate of those persons
Right.
who lose their jobs. And so in that context, we'll be negotiating retraining programs and so on, so that it would assist workers to transition
Yep.
out.
You keep saying we, but as the head of the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions, you speak on behalf of all unions?
Not all. We speak really on behalf of our member unions, and at present we have 12 member unions.
Which would mean that you're not specifically involved with the day-to-day, say the union who looks after the teachers then. You would be involved in that discussion also?
No, but the Teachers Association is a member of the Jamaica
JCTU.
Confederation.
So then your
of Trade
role
Unions.
to that union would be what? So they're
Well,
a little bit annoyed with the government because they're not getting money, and some say they're
part of it may be to, we have our discussions as a confederation, and everybody is involved in those discussions.
Would you be like an advisory?
And then
Be
we
like
would
an
be able
advisory
to present advice or information that we would have that could assist persons.
So
to
when
be
they say
able
they're
to
not
advance.
accepting the 6, and if it stay at the 6, then when sick out and stuff, you get involved and you say what to that now?
No, well, in our discussions, like at the level of the board of the Confederation, we would be looking at all the factors and be able to offer advice as to whether we believe that's the correct approach. But each union is a sovereign organization, and so they are able to take any decision that their members mandate them.
You said in response to Sim's question that right across the world people are having this discussion that unions might not be relevant. Why?
Because of the same problems. Worldwide, what you have is the ascendancy of capital at this point.
So does that mean then that you soon won't be relevant for real?
Well, as I said, we have to be reinventing ourselves. So at one point in time, when most employers were going the route of contract employment, everybody thought it was the death of the trade union movement. But then we have to look at the services that we offer. So we can offer services in various contexts. And certainly within Jamaica, one of the things that we sought to ensure is that once you could define a worker to include a contractor, if the service that the person was offering to the employer was within a particular context, then it meant that the unions could represent the individual. So nowadays we are doing individual representation as well as group representation. And very often, even where we have contract employees, if we are able to bring all of them together, then we represent them as a group as well.
Another part of the paradigm shift.
Right, and so we have to be looking at all different types of services now, because of the fact that the original organization of workers into factories and that kind of setting is now on the wane. And so we have to make ourselves relevant by going out there and identifying where these opportunities are and be able to actually advocate, because those are the skills that trade unionists bring. And so that is what we are doing now.
There's a criticism. This article is old. It's about a year old, but I'll bring it up anyway. Sociologist Dr. Orville Taylor saying the trade union movement is not providing leaders like it once did, political leaders. There's a missing chair there. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Well, that may be true, but a lot of us have taken the view that while the trade unions need to have a political agenda in terms of, because not everything that we want to achieve on behalf of workers can be achieved around the bargaining table, bearing in mind that we have a role not just at the workplace, we believe, but we have a role in general society. And so, you know, the concept of the working class and what we are able to do. So a lot of our representation really benefits not just our members, because if we are talking minimum wage, where we are part of that discussion, it's not just
Lifts
about
everybody.
our members.
Yes.
So we have taken the view that we have to have this political agenda, but we don't have to be directly involved in the
You don't have to be
political
politicians.
process,
Yes.
right? And so several of the younger trade unionists have sort of shied away from that avenue, but that does not mean that we do not recognize that we have a role.
Finally, I said I know which line you would take, but do you see the day when you won't be relevant and won't be necessary?
Not right now. I think I saw a quote some time ago from a writer, in one of the editors in the Financial Times in London. And he had said at that time, if trade unions did not exist, they would have to be invented. And this was in the period of the 90s, when, you know, everybody was figuring that the trade union movement would be done and dead. And he, in his investigation, found that was, in fact, that the trade unions were necessary. But as I say, as with any other organization, the services that you offer, you have to constantly be looking at them.
But I can't ever
be
see the day
trying to
when it won't be
ensure.
relevant.
Yeah,
As long as you have employees and employers, you don't need an intermediary,
Thanks for
I
coming.
think.
No problem.
Thank you very
She's the
much,
president
madam.
of Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions, Mrs. Helene Davis White.
Stay with us, folks. We are changing the way we mentor when we return from this break.